Hello, everybody. Welcome to TMYS Academy. We have the very prolific and lovely Ira Dubey with us today, who has been leaving lasting impressions with her projects in theatre, web shows, and films. Her latest being Devika Rani, running in packed houses, and theatre lovers are shouting praises. With Ira, we shall discuss reading versus personifying, from story to stage, characters in a book vis-a-vis characters in an audiovisual show. Welcome, Ira.
Thank you so much, Coral, for that lovely introduction also.
My pleasure. So, Ira, what is your relationship with books? Do you get time to read? And if yes, what do you read? What are you reading now?
Well, my relationship with books is very special. To begin with, my phone is currently leaned up against a stack of books, which I have pulled out from my bookshelf during this quarantine. I have cleaned up my whole bookshelf and found a lot of books that I've been meaning to read for many years. We all have these very special and precious areas of our houses where we keep our books, for those of us who enjoy reading and who love books. And friends of mine have come and asked me, so have you read all these? And most of them I have, but there's some that we buy for our collections very greedily, and then, they're classics and we actually never get around to reading them. So I pulled out exactly those books, and my phone is right now leaned up on those books. And my relationship with books is a old and a very close one, a very intimate one. When I was a kid, at one point, I was a voracious reader. I used to read a book a day at one point. I was reading things like The Diary of Anne Frank and even Kundera and all at a very young age. Then I studied literature while I was in school, literature and theatre. So I was very familiar with a lot of the world's finest writers at a very young age. So my relationship with books is a very special and a very old one. However, when life takes over, and you suddenly become an adult after college and you're thrown out into the real world, somehow, you find less and less time to commit to reading, and to sort of pursuing that hobby and to nurturing that hobby and that passion, unless you are in the business like yourself and like a lot of the people who are going to be watching this video, who are writing consistently. In fact, during this lockdown, the first 12 days or so, Coral, I devoured 5 books back to back. I just was so happy to have the time and the space to actually sit down and not have to worry about getting to work or, the pressure of having to do something, where I could have the time to, just enjoy the pleasure of reading. So I went back to some Kunderas that I had not read. I read a lot of Rohinton Mistry, which I had not read, A Fine Balance, which is a very beautiful book, a very interesting and sort of haunting book at this time also, because it's very much about people from different classes, who sort of have to come together and are thrown together and during a state of emergency, So it was very haunting to read that book, particularly now. Then I read some African writers, Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, a beautiful book which I had missed along the way. So I read a mix and match of stuff at the beginning of this quarantine, and then I decided to go and spend a couple of weeks with my mum. And during the first half of the quarantine, I was completely alone. So I think solitude also really allows you to enjoy the pleasure of reading. Once I went to my mum's, it was a lot of other things happening, and a lot of Netflix and a lot of other stuff, So the time became less and less to actually just spend those 2 hours, every day, having the luxury of having that time to read. So my relationship with books is a very intimate one. It's a very special one. As I said, I think after college, what happened was I was abroad. I went to Yale University to do my undergraduate, and I studied theatre there. And there was so much course material that we were given. We had these sheets and sheets of paper, which was, they used to call it additional source material, reference material and all that. And we used to look at those pages, my friends and I, my classmates and my college mates and I. And we used to be like, oh my God, and we dreaded going to the library and sitting with all those long lists of books, because we were so inundated and overwhelmed with the amount of coursework that we had to do. Because there, the system is such, it's a liberal arts system. You must be very aware of this, considering you have spent a lot of time outside India. So I think that the liberal arts system allows you, unlike the Indian system, which is more of a rote system of learning, allows you to really sort of absorb and use your mind, and has a more holistic approach to education. where you are reading a multitude of books and a multitude of research on a particular subject, and then you come up with your own ideas about it. You're not just replicating something that someone else has said, or a theory that you just sort of sort of vomiting that out back onto a paper. I think you have to use your mind a lot more. And so I think there one was reading so much for work, for study, that reading for pleasure took a complete backseat.
Mm-hmm.
And then work and life takes over, and I became involved in theatre from a very young age, from the age of 19. Actually, much before that, I was already dancing around on stage when I was a kid. But when I started acting professionally at 19, there was no looking back. Then of course, as we will get into this conversation, I know you're going to ask me a lot of sort of things related to the process of even creating a character, and when I read novels versus reading plays or screenplays. So I think that took over. Reading plays, studying plays, analyzing plays, doing research on plays and stuff like that. So I think this quarantine has really allowed me to go back to one of the simplest pleasures of life, which is actually reading books, and reading and touching books, not reading them on a Kindle.
So, just tempted to, since you just spoke about your screenplays right in the beginning, I'm just very much tempted to ask you that, is reading a book and reading a screenplay different for you? Or
Yes, absolutely. I think that they're very different. They're extremely different forms.
Mm-hmm.
A novel has the capacity to make you completely absorbed in a different world.
Mm-hmm.
A screenplay is a cinematic or a visual representation of a story, which is written in a very different format. There is a technique to it, there's an art to it, and it's a visual landscape. A screenplay really takes you, it's actually got very little dialogue. A script, on the other hand, a play, is often very verbose. It's got more dialogues, but it's again meant to be heard.
Right.
You see, scripts and screenplays, theatre or film or web series for that matter, are meant to be heard. They are meant to be seen. They're not meant for you to, as an individual in your own space, absorb it and enter that world. What happens with a novel is that your own imagination creates that novel for you, for Coral in a different way, for Ira in a different way, for XYZ in a different way. You experience that novel in a very individual way, in a very unique way. And that is it's a complete holistic experience. It's an immersive experience on the written level, on the page level. A screenplay and a script, on the other hand, are meant to be taken off the page and made into something else. Either a movie on a big screen, or on your home screen, or on a stage somewhere, or on the street somewhere, or in a church somewhere. You're meant to be seeing it performed. It comes alive through the performance. And again, there's a difference between stage and film, because in stage, the actors bring it alive. The actors bring the script alive. The directors, of course, is a guiding light, is the captain of the ship. But once the play is ready, and once you're actually out there performing it for an audience, the audience is receiving it from the actor. So the actor plays a very pivotal role in theatre. In cinema, it's a little bit different. In cinema, the director is telling that story. The screenplay writer, that's why you find very often screenplay writers are directors. Directors are screenplay writers, because they see the vision of the story. So they know how they want to tell the story. So in cinema, I feel that the director is the captain of the ship. It's his visual storytelling and how the narrative is told through his vision and through his eye, his directorial eye, is how the audience receives the story. Because the actor is a cog in a very large machinery in a film. The camera is rolling to the time the camera cuts. That's it. So the film goes through a process, a long process, from the screenplay level to the actual vision of the final film, which is again, I think, it's a very directorial venture. So I feel that's the difference between the three.
Right. So from what I hear from you, and it was obviously expected, that whether it is a personal consumption, I mean, I'm talking about stories, that whether it's a personal consumption or a collective consumption, whether it is a book or it is a screenplay.
Yes.
Your consumption pattern is very much, you are very possessive about the particular thing that you are consuming, and you are very involved in that particular process. So given that, probably when you are reading a book, or when you are in theater, when you are essaying a particular role, obviously the way it talks to you, the screenplay, the way it talks to you is far more in depth than probably if we are sitting and hearing it with you on
Yes,
the space.
yes.
So, is there a character which you actually heard the screenplay and you felt that, boss, this will be very demanding and this will be something that will take a lot from me in terms of thinking, in terms of
Yes, I
research?
think I think both my solo piece, which is Nine Parts of Desire, and my latest play, which is Devika Rani, both I felt the same with. I felt exactly what you're saying, which is that I felt that there would be a lot of research involved. There would be a lot of me having to go very deep with my understanding of these people, these characters. Nine Parts was completely alien for me because it was an Iraqi setting. It was a story of 9 Iraqi women. And it was about their struggles. I've never been to Iraq. I don't know anything about the Middle East beyond what we see in the news, because it's always in the news, and it's such a broken and disturbed area of the world, which is, my heart goes out to the Middle East, because it's been in so much strife for so many decades now. And it's a very heartbreaking sort of a place to really delve into. What people are going through there is very difficult to get your psyche into that world, because it's also a war-torn world. You see, the Middle East is a place where there has been strife, like I said, for so many decades, that people are used to living with war on a day-to-day basis. That is something we have never experienced. You see, as an actor living in Bombay and born and brought up in India, I have never experienced that. So I think to get into the psyche of a war-torn nation, 2, to get into the psyche of Middle Eastern women, and 3, to break through that and to realize and come to a point where truthfully I can say that all our experiences are universal. You see, because at the end of the day, it is a story of survivors, women who are strong, women who have a voice, women who are having affairs, women who drink scotch, women who are, sort of losing children, who are doctors, who are educated, who are, all kinds of women from varying backgrounds and varying ages. So I think to really imbibe that world, that took a lot out of me and took a lot of research. My mother always teases me and tells me that I'm the kind of actor, a lot of my actor friends also tell me that I'm the kind of actor who goes very deep into her characters and very deep into the process. And for me, that works. You see, I think for other people, everyone marches to the beat of their own drum. And everyone has their own method and process. And I very much come from the belief that every actor has something unique to bring to the table, and they have their own process, and whatever makes them work, that's great for them. And with me, this works. This has always worked. I like to dig very deep. I like to do a lot of research. I like to read a lot. So I think with that particular, I was lucky enough because the playwright, who's also an Iraqi American woman, was available to me. I had a lot of questions. She gave me a lot of insight. She was always available on email. It was like we had this love affair over email, because I was constantly writing her long emails about various different questions about different things. And they were all based on 10 years of research. She had done her work herself. She had interviewed a bunch of women. So the characters were based on real life people. So here I was trying to, get under the skin of each of these women and make them my own, you see. So it wasn't just working on the Iraqi accent, or it wasn't all those sort of superficial levels. It was a much deeper level of trying to understand the cultural, social, political ethos of those women. So that took a lot of work. And Devika, because she was a very big star at one point in Indian cinema. She was a studio head. She was a woman who lived life on her own terms. She was known as the Dragon Lady. She was a very feisty woman who lived right into her 80s. She gave up cinema at the prime of her career. She ran a studio. She discovered people like Raj Kapoor, Madhubala, Dilip Kumar, Manto. There were bunch of people who she actually, Ashok Kumar, who she did many films with and had a string of successes and hits with. So she was a woman who's a very lesser known figure in Indian cinema. A lot of people don't know who Devika Chaudhary was. Who was this woman? And yet she was one of our biggest stars right at the beginning of Indian cinema, at its very, very nascent stages. She did an English film. She was very well applauded and received in Hollywood. She could have worked there if she chose to, but she chose to come back to India. So this woman was a real star. So I think to tell her story was also, it was extremely exciting. It was extremely, it was fascinating for me to dig deep into her life, because there's very little material about her out there, except from, again, from the source material, which is a book written by Kishwar Desai, which is going to come out soon, which is sort of a biography of hers. So apart from that and all the research material that Kishwar had, again, I used to chew her brains. I used to, sort of pick her brains and sort of get into all the, everything that was not in the play. I would be like, yeah, but can you give me some background on this? Can you give me some background on that? And can you send me those chapters from your book? And she's like, but it's not published yet. My publisher's going to kill me. And I was like, no, but I have to get some insight on this and that. So yeah, I think that even to get under the skin of Devika was a very interesting process for me, because here she was a very old-fashioned actress from the 1930s, a very different aesthetic, a very different everything, Bengali, and very much a person who was way ahead of her time. Today we talk about a lot of women. We're such strong. You and I are talking here today about books, and there are women changing the world on a day-to-day basis, and I have such great respect for you and all of the women out there who have their own voice and who really have their own careers and who are independent. And I just feel that today, when we talk about people who are doing what Devika did almost 90 years ago, there's so much awe and there's so much pride, whether it's Priyanka Chopra, or whether it's Anushka Sharma, or whether in the West it's Nicole Kidman or Reese Witherspoon. They can have it all. They can be producers, they can be actresses, they can be stars, they can be champions of, humanitarian causes. They can do so many different things. They can be parents, they can be wives, they can have it all. So I think that here was a woman whose story was one that was yearning to be told, and she lived 90 years ago. So to celebrate her, to remember her, to honor her, to pay tribute to her, I think it was a necessary and very beautiful journey for me.
Yeah. So how do you prepare for your portrayals? When I'm talking about you portraying your characters on stage, where I'm coming from is that when we as authors write,
yes,
and right now I'm talking about a fiction,
yeah,
we may not have seen the characters, but somewhere in our heart those characters live. We have
yes,
kind of lived with them. We have kind of debated with ourselves and created the character. It's like wording something, right?
yeah,
There's a part of us when it goes. But you as an actor, when you internalize that character and give it a completely new, you give it a face, not a new
yes,
face, but you give it a face. And with your face, you probably that character is reborn.
yes, reimagine it. Yeah,
Exactly.
yes,
So that is where probably a book and a audiovisual presentation differs. But having
yes.
said that, there is a lot of you in that character. How does
Yes.
this kind of an
Yes,
interaction happen?
yes. In fact, that's a question I would love to ask you, as an author. No, I would love to ask you, how do you build and create characters in a book, in a novel? I find it fascinating. You touched upon it a little bit right now. And I've always wondered, how do you make them part of yourself? Are they inspired by people from your own life? Have you imagined them out of thin air? How do you create these characters? So to me, that is a fascinating thing. And I would love to chat with you about that. And I would love to hear your views on that. But to answer the question, yes, I think that there is always a little bit of you in every part you play. You see, what every acting theory in the world, and I guess, again, I will say this at the outset, there's only your way. There's no one way. You can read every theory there is. You can listen to all the, the teachers there are. You can listen to all your favorite actors that there are. Everybody develops over time and evolves their own way, and that's what makes you unique as an actor. So I think that for me, there's always a part of me. You tap into, we talk about things like emotional memory. We talk about imagination. In acting theory, these concepts are very, very, very common. They're very well known, much talked about, much studied, much debated about tapping into your emotional memory. How much of it is from your own experience? How much of it is your imagination? How do you recreate the physical life of a character? How do you use your body for a character? How would this character walk, think, speak, look, dress? So I think there are all these different aspects that the more you read and absorb, the more and then you have to let your imagination, and then you try things. You see, as you said, you debate with your characters in your head. You debate with them and you say, okay, would he do this? Would she do that? Would she say this? Would she think like that? Would she philosophize this? Would she make this choice? You make these, you have to debate those things, and you have to really clarify them for yourself in your mind, before you can actually put them down on paper and say, yes, this makes sense. All the dots are joining now. So similarly, we go through a similar process where we have a skeleton.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have an actual person like Devika, but still with Devika, I had one interview of hers when she was 82 years old, and besides that, I had nothing. I could not see her. I could not hear her. I didn't know what she sounded like, looked like, talked like, walked like, nothing. So I think whether it's a real character or whether it's a fictitious character, doesn't matter. You have to create that character's universe for yourself. Now, how deep you want to go, how much you want to go. This character was born on so-and-so date. In her childhood, she liked to do this. There are many different ways to approach it. Some people like to go very deep. वो ये करती थी, वो स्कूल में ये खाती थी, मतलब there's a limit to it. People like to go. There's a method. People always laugh, and there's a lot of debate in the theater world about the method, and the acting world about the method and the merits of the method as a technique of acting. So there are many different theories to it. I say whatever works for you. However you find your truth and come to your truth and make me believe that you're that person and convince me that you're that person. However you come to it is your, it doesn't matter. Whatever way is fine as long as it works. So I think that for us, it is a question of taking what we can as source material and then putting it into ourselves.
Mm.
So someone like Meryl Streep, for instance, you see, or someone even like Alia Bhatt, for instance, there's always a part of themselves in those characters.
Absolutely.
You see, you have to, because that is your instrument. As an actor, your instrument is your voice, your body, and your imagination, your mental capacity, and your observation of human life, human behavior. I think actors are the biggest observers, or should be the biggest observers of human life. And that's where reading comes into play. The more I read and absorb from different parts of the world, the more I try and understand how people live in every single setting, in every single culture, the more I can use that in my storehouse to create a character for myself. You see? So it's all connected.
Super. So, when you were saying, I was just remembering that there was one person. I was in a literature festival and I was asked about a book that I had written, that what is the graph of this character and how did you sketch the graph? And I was
That's
like,
such a common term.
Yeah, and I was like,
everyone loves that word. This is a very interesting point, which is why I want to hear your views and okay, tell me in a nutshell, how do you create characters in your novels?
I think,
what do you start with and where do you end up?
Ira, I'm not a writer who plans my stories at all. I have never done. I told my editors also that, when I write, it's just when I sit on the laptop, it comes from within. Probably it is very, very subconscious led. For me personally, I know that there are authors who are extremely systematic in planning their stories, first chapter, second chapter, third chapter. I don't know when I'm writing my first chapter where my fourth chapter will go.
So it's a God's gift.
Yeah, it's totally organic. So probably
but you're one of the blessed few then.
Yes. I really believe that I have that blessing. But yes, the process is like that. It just comes from within.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. That's amazing. I think that's really a God-given gift then. When it comes from a subconscious level, it reminds me of every writer like Virginia Woolf and many writers actually say, because I think even with writers, there are two schools of thought. I've always met people who come from two schools of thought. One is yours, where everyone, says that it comes as an organic thing. I used to write poetry when I was younger. And in fact, reading this time during quarantine, I've written some poems because they just came, they just flowed, and that's how I believe art, and any art form actually should come. It should come somewhere organically. Yes, you can let it simmer, you can let it cook a little, you can evolve it, you can do all that, and you can sort of, but the grains and the foundation is already there. Something is there. Some magic has already come, So I think with art, very often it does happen like that. And similarly in the acting process, you take all this, but then, there'll be moments in rehearsal where there's magic. There's moments where you feel like, oh my God, I've got this character. I've understood. This is who she is, So I think we're blessed to have those. But for a lot of people, it's the other way. Like you said, a lot of writers tell me that it's very systematic. It's a discipline. Writing involves rigor. We have to sit down every day and write. Whatever comes, we just write, even if it's rubbish. So I think that what I've understood, because if I ever get onto writing, if I ever do that in my life, or I ever get onto directing, which I would love to film in the future, I think that writing should be a combination of both. You know, it should be a combination of both, because you can always better your work. I was always of the imagination when I was younger that, oh my god, मैंने ये लिख दिया, बहुत बहुत ही मतलब धमाकेदार poem है, इसको छोड़ दो, बस ऐसे ही रहने दो, you know. But it can't get better than this. I'll just spoil it if I try to touch it now. But the truth is that that's our own fear, you know, at some level, our own creative fear, where we feel like, oh my god, we've created something nice, now we might spoil it. But actually there is always room for improvement, there's room for betterment also. So I think you've got to know when you have a good thing, and you've got to know when to let it be. So it's that little balance that is always important. But coming back to what you were saying, the graph, I think you were talking about a very interesting point that you brought up, was the graph of a character. Now this graph of a character is become a very, you know, it's actually a screenwriting term. It's a screenwriting term, which is to do with, if you break it down and you study screenwriting basically, or if you study playwriting even, these terms come up, you know, where you have the arc of a character. Now that is, you know, the thing is, in a traditional story, whether it's tragedy or a drama, or, you know, basically there's tragedy and there's comedy, right? Comedy is situational or incident based or farcical, and there are many different forms of comedy in terms of performance, in terms of storytelling. Right? Storytelling goes back to tragedy and comedy. And in tragedy, I think it comes from tragedy, the drama in the modern day context, whether you look at Hollywood or you look at Bollywood, it doesn't matter. Wherever it is, in fact, in the world, the drama has this certain structure to it. That there's this tragic hero at its center, like he has to go through something. He starts off somewhere and then he has to go through something, and he has a fall from grace and what they call a denouement of some kind. And then he, you know, sort of picks up the pieces of everything together and then comes out a hero, right? Or goes through a tragic trajectory and loses everything, you know. So it's some combination of all that, which is part of every modern day drama at some level. So I think the arc is basically referring to some sort of transformation in the character. So whether it's for good or for bad, whether it's a downward way or it's an upward way, it doesn't really matter. The character must evolve. What that means, I think, basically is that if you're telling me a story about a character who stays the same, to me, that's not elevating in any way. And at the end of the day, art of any kind has to elevate you.
It has a journey, obviously.
Yes. And it has to, yes, it can't stay on the same plane, you know. So I think when they talk about an arc, they talk about an evolution or a transformation of some kind, even if it's subtle. You know, and then we talk about stream of consciousness writers like Virginia Woolf or whoever else. And there you very often you are into the psychological sort of world of that character, where there may not be some great transformation or great change. They're very small, not even discernible changes that happen. So it depends on what the form of the novel is also, you know. Sometimes it's a stream of consciousness style. Sometimes it's a fantasy style. Sometimes it's something else. So the genre, the form is very important when thinking about all these.
True that. I mean, now that I'm talking to you about this, you know, I remember that there are author friends, or there are people in media, storytellers basically, I wouldn't say just author, but storytellers, who very specifically have their character arcs or character definitions very strongly laid out. So they know what the character will do when they're angry. They know what the character will do when they're happy. And that is something that I have been, personally, that is something that has always confused me, that till the time the character is angry, how do you know how the character will behave?
How do you know? Yeah, so exactly, there's a limit, you see. There's a balance that you may say, okay, chalo, mujhe ye mil gaya. So I think my character comes from XYZ background, and my character has all these different things that have made him who he is. But in that moment, you have to allow a little room for spontaneity, you know? For the creative process to really like blossom.
Absolutely.
So I think in that sense, you can't be so structured that you break it down so much that every single, you know, note of that character is already defined.
True.
You have to allow some room for spontaneity, because that's how life is, man.
Oh, yes. You know, I'll ask you something which is a little different. And this I asked because I have had superb experiences in this space. And I'll share a little, but I know that you will have a lot to share in this space also. When you read, do you make notes on the sides? I mean, it could be while hearing a screenplay, or it could be while reading a book. I am from Calcutta, born and brought up there. And I used to buy a lot of books from College Street. And those are age-old books, you know. I mean, there can be, it probably is a 50, 100-year-old book being recirculated. And towards the sides, I would see either notes, or towards the beginning or end, there would be something, a letter, a sentence written in dedication to someone, or even a rose. Or I mean, people didn't remove those, and we
Yeah.
got the book at throwaway prices, but with priceless things that went with.
Yes. Exactly, that's priceless. There's such romance in that, and there's such history in that, you see. And to answer your question, yes, 125,000,000%, I'm a copious note taker. And I have been from a very young age. I think this is something that happened in a twofold way for me. I was a nerd in school. Okay, so I used to constantly take a lot of notes everywhere. I mean, my books were filled with notes of all kinds. So I was a very studious person when I was young, and that transferred into into my adult life also. And the second thing that really influenced me to take notes is my grandmother, who used to make us write a lot as children. You know, we used to write thoughts for the day, we used to write prayers, we used to have diaries. And it was also a sort of a experiment in, I think, in fine-tuning our handwriting and teaching us how to write better. She was very disciplined, my grandmother, my mom's mom, my nani, about making us write on a regular basis, you know, on a day-to-day basis almost, or whenever we would see her and spend time with her. And often we were there for the full summer or something. And so every single day we would have to maintain a journal and write down either beautiful sayings, quotes. My grandfather was also a very, very erudite and educated man, and he had, you know, very, very well-read man. So either it would be quotes or it would be prayers. My nani was a very spiritual woman, so it would be or it would be sayings or thoughts for the day. And those habits, I think, stayed with all of us for many, many years. You know, and yes, taking notes is something that I still need a piece of paper. I'm in the process of, right now as we speak, rehearsing a new play online. You know, we're creating a sort of a new way of doing a theater show online, and I'm very excited about it because it's a new language, you know, trying to shoot the play and then putting it on Zoom or putting it online somewhere, and it's really exciting. But I think even now, like while I'm reading, I'm talking on my phone like I'm talking to you now, and I'm reading on my laptop, and I'm itching to get my script in my hand so that I can start making notes. You know, I'm just like, okay, I need a piece of paper in my hand now. That's it. This bahut ho gaya, computer bahut ho gaya. So I think that there is a it's a way of my nani I still have books of hers where she's underlined, you know, in a red pen and with a ruler. She's underlined things in books and she's marked them and she's made little notes next to them and all that. So I think it's a very precious and very old way of sort of making something very much your own and leaving it behind for others to find, like you did.
Absolutely. And actually, this has so much to do with a person, because your notes would be so different from someone else's. And
yes.
so much about you, because virtually, the moment we move virtual and with technology and stuff, technology is great. But you know, these things, I'm so worried that these things will be lost from life.
Yes, and I think that's why we have to encourage books. We have to encourage young people to continue reading. You see, I think the Kindle is great. I mean, you're absolutely right. You're bang on. Technology can do wonders. I mean, where would we be today now in this COVID-19 situation without technology? You know, we would not be talking, you and I. So I think we can't diss it at all. I mean, that's the future. But I still feel that we must encourage the younger generation to enjoy the simple things and to enjoy the tangible things. You see, the tangible food on the street, or the tangible book, or the tangible, you know, the tangible pleasures of life. I mean, taking a walk now has a totally different meaning.
True. So you may love a character or feel touched by a character when you are reading a book or a screenplay, but when you become that character and play the part in the story, which the character may be a positive character or a negative character, or it obviously will have its own nuances, but you are playing that character and others react to you. Does that process feel more personal? I mean, what kind of a touch is that?
You mean the difference between reading and experiencing a book on my own, and then giving that, and versus giving a character to an audience who receives it?
Yeah, I mean, when you are reading, it is more yours. But when
yes. So I think when you're reading, again, I think that's when your own individualistic, very unique imagination comes into play. You will experience a book in your own way. There are two books, for instance, which for me, were very powerful. I had to study them, but then they stayed with me for many years after. One was called Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, and the other one was called Lord of the Flies by William Golding. So I think that these two books, they're extremely powerful. One is about a journey of a man into the heart of Africa. And the other one is about a group of boys who get marooned on an island, and then they have to survive on that island and then make their own rules, and almost like a replica of a political sort of a system and structure. So it's a very haunting book. And both these books, for instance, if anyone else had to read, or if I had to sit and discuss them with people, they may not have had the same impact. It's also the time in your life when you read the books. It's also your own life experience up to that point in your life when you read books. There are so many factors which make one book meaningful for somebody and another book meaningful for somebody else. At the same time, there are books that everybody will love, because they talk to the very essence of human experience. You see, doesn't matter what the context is, doesn't matter what the setting is, doesn't matter who the character is and what kind of complicated Russian or Japanese name they have. It does not matter, you see, because the essence of the human experience is the same, and that touches a chord. And that's when a miracle happens in literature, So I think that, yes, is a very individual experience. But while you were talking, another thought came to my mind, which I will just touch upon once I've answered this question. So yes, that is a very individual experience. And when I take it to an audience, I have read what I had to read, and I have made that character my own. Now it is my vessel, my instrument as a performer, which is portraying that character for you. So there's only one way that you can receive it, you see. You may read a book. Now, this what I wanted to touch upon was the fact that, let's say we take a book which has been adapted into a film. Okay, this is happening a lot nowadays. It's the new, the buzzword in Indian sort of television and content is content. That's the buzzword. Everyone is like content chahiye, ye chahiye, wo chahiye. So books are being picked up like hotcakes, because people want to make books into shows. People want to make books into films, and this has been a trend happening in the West for a while now. It started with the biopics, it started with the true life stories, and it all this adapting from books has been around for sort of, I'm sure, decades. But still, it's been now in the last 15, 20 years, it's become like huge, especially in the last 10 years in India. So it's really flying now. So people want books. I'm sure people are going to be asking for your books also, Koral, soon. So I think that
one fourth book already optioned.
Exactly. So now this is the buzzword. Everybody wants to make, adapt. So when you adapt, that's a very interesting sort of a area, because you're adapting, you're taking that character. Everyone can experience the book. People still have the book out there to read. That's where the inevitable comparison comes. Arey, book was much better. Arey, the film was nothing compared to the book. It was not a patch on the book, So that we've all done that. We've all seen films where very rare to find a film that matches up to the book. Because if you read a book and you already imagine that story in your head, that experience is your experience. No film will ever live up to it, because the film is that person's experience. The film is the director's experience of the book. Sometimes it touches it. Sometimes it comes very close, but often it does not, or it's very different, or it's not what you want it to be. It's not what you experienced, you see. So you feel let down, you feel disappointed, So for instance, one beautiful example of something where, let's say, at least I didn't feel disappointed is Little Women. It's a book that we all grew up with. There are many, many versions of it. This contemporary version of it, which is a very, I think, a very sort of energetic, vibrant, and alive version of it, without losing the essence of the ethos of that world. Very truthful version of it. And I think that they really got it right. They really got it right. So I think, but that's difficult to pull off, you see. So I think when you have a book as a base to start with, and you have a reference, people will always expect more. Then your task is much more difficult.
Absolutely.
Because if somebody's already Joe on a page for me for the last 20 years, suddenly I want to see Joe on a screen, and I say, okay, you better live up to that. So in that sense, it is much harder. But when you don't have a book, it can have its pros and cons, because you have all you need to create Joe in the way that you want to create Joe. Even 100 years later, you can create a character from a book and be true to its essence, and it's a real treat for an actor to do that, to take a character that is a beloved character, but it's also a lot of pressure. It's a lot. Every actor will tell you that, oh my God, there's a pressure to play this Elizabeth in The Crown. I mean, Queen Elizabeth, man. How could it get bigger than that?
Yeah.
That beautiful actress, both of them. What's her name? Claire Foy, in the first couple of seasons, and then the wonderful Olivia Colman in the last season, have done a fantastic job. You know, they must have studied a lot, done a lot of research, or they may not have. You know, who knows what their process was? But they've got the sur of that character right. They've retained the dignity of that woman, the essence of that woman, the soul of that woman. You know, so I think that is what you need to achieve. So when you don't have a book, then you have to again find that sur, what we call the sur, what I like to call the sur of that character. What makes that character tick? What is the truth of that character? What is the soul of that character? And everything around it, his or her choices, his or her failures, his or her mistakes, his or her achievements, must fall into that universe that goes with the sur of that character. So if I feel like I've got the sur right, you know, like Devika, I keep joking and saying, my God, I look nothing like her. She was an ethereal beauty. My God, old-fashioned beauty, classical beauty. I don't look like her. But to get under the skin of her and make you believe that I am her, and make you care about her and her story and her journey, and make you really feel for her. I know that by that last image of the play, which I think is a stroke of genius on my mother's part, because there's a beautiful last image in the play where she kind of, I don't want to give away too much, but it's the end of her journey in cinema. And it's such a strong image that people have come backstage and told me, my God, you know, we were in tears, we were crying, we were this, we were that, because you've seen this girl from 18, you know, go through whatever she's gone through, and then suddenly she's reached a point where, my God, the audience really sort of connects with her. So that's all you can hope for. Because yes, theatre is a live medium. It is a live medium. Cinema, you can still experience on your own. I can sit and watch a movie on my laptop. I can sit and watch a movie on my headphones quietly in my room somewhere, and it will still be my own experience of it. Yes, I will be told a story, and I will go back to watch a certain director's, you know, vision of it, or his voice, because I like his voice, or I like the way he tells stories. But it is still my experience of that story. There's a little more manipulation there, because it is a visual thing. You don't have a choice. You know, your imagination is being used less than in a novel, right? You're experiencing it in a very visual way, in a very immediate way. But theatre is even more immediate than that, because it'll only be those 2 hours that you will see that play and you'll say, oh my God, this is how I felt. You know, this is what I experienced. So it depends.
My last question. Obviously, no kind of communication or no kind of art is unidirectional. The creator will have much more to talk about, or much more involvement in presenting it. But then there's a role played by the receiver as well.
Yes,
audience,
of course.
right? So is there any such audience reaction, someone said, or someone wrote to you something, which made you really think about yourself or your character or your play? Did you get any such audience response, which you would like to name here?
I think a lot of people who've come and watched my theatre work, see, I must say now, and I will say this, and I've been saying it, I mean, for a while, that in film, I don't think I have done the kind of work that I have been able to do and achieve on stage. The kind of scope of trying to portray a character and trying to get the arc and the graph of a character. No, forget the graph and the arc, but even really portray a character which really takes you on a journey. Because I feel that you've got to take the audience on a journey with you. You know, they are there with you for those 2 hours, whether it's in a film or in a play, and you have to take them on that journey. So if you've taken them on that journey, they will come back and they will experience it again in a very unique way to them. So I've got lots of different responses from people. People have loved 9 Parts unanimously. People have loved 9 Parts because it is, again, the essence of the human experience. Women have come, Iraqi women, Middle Eastern women have come and told me how authentic and how meaningful this story has been for them to watch it, even in India or wherever else they may have seen it. To see their story being told by an Indian actress in Bombay was a very unusual experience for them, but yet it rang true for them. You see? So I think that to me is the biggest compliment. That a Middle Eastern person can come to me and tell me that, look, this was my story. This was my story, you know. Even with the play like 30 Days in September, which is about sexual abuse. Okay. The number of people who've come backstage and told me that, my God, this was our story. You know, that is the biggest compliment as an actor that you can get. One is that people relate to it in that way. And I think the other is that people really tell me that I'm a powerhouse on stage and that I really transform and that I really became that character and that I really became this person. That's the other greatest compliment that you can get. Because if I can convince you that I was not Ira Dubey and I was this person, my job is done, you know. And then you're on the ride with me. We're on a big, massive, fun ride.
True that. Ira, thank you so much for taking out time for this. You know, I have had many insightful conversations with a lot of people, but this was something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed.
Thank you, Koral. So did I. So did I.
Thank you